What's up, guys? It has been with 2020 election predictions, and today we are only 4 days away from the election. We are getting closer and closer. I just voted two days, so that's a big deal. I might go on the live stream later today and tell you who I voted for. Maybe not. We'll see. But right now, this is the presidential race as I see it right now. We have 163 electoral votes for Trump Pence and 218 for Biden Harris. And let me kind of fill in some of the states that I think are pretty obvious at this point. But I feel it in Texas and Nevada right now because on either side, I've commented that Texas is going to get red. It might be in the tilt category, but regardless, Trump I think is going to carry Texas. Same with Biden in the state of Nevada. And if Trump loses Texas, he's done. So uh, we can start there. The first states that I want to fill in are Minnesota. While I thought Minnesota might have been closer before, just kind of looking at the poll, so the Trafalgar group still has Biden up by 3 points, and typically that they've been more right leaning. So, and if we take kind of the aggregate of the polls, Trump is down by about 8 to 9 points. So I think Trump might outperform the polls a little bit, maybe get a little bit closer to the Trafalgar number. But I still think he's probably going to lose the state between 5 and 6 points. And a similar deal in the state of New Hampshire. I think it's going to be about right at 5 points. But again, these are states that Trump didn't win in 2016 and doesn't really need to win in 2020. I think that the election is really going to come down to kind of the states that I haven't filled out yet right here. Okay, so moving forward, I want to start out in the state of Iowa. I think Iowa is still going to be lean Republican despite all the polls that show Biden up. Trump outperformed the polls in Iowa by about 7 points in 2016. He was projected to win in 2016, and he won by a lot more. So this kind of wasn't the news coverage. The news coverage was in the states where Clinton was projected to win, but Trump ended up winning. In the state of Iowa, Trump outperformed expectations tremendously, and I think he will again. I don't think Trump's going to win it by the same margin that he did in 2016. I expect him to win it by 2 to 4 points, maybe closer to 2 to 3 points. But Iowa, at this point, I feel pretty confident calling it in Trump's column. Similar deal in the state of Ohio. Polls have actually indicated that Ohio might be to the right of Iowa when it was the opposite in 2016. But I tend to kind of clump these two states together. They're definitely more Republican leaning than the three states that I think will matter tremendously. But I still expect these to go pretty handily in the Trump column. So next, I want to move on to the state of Wisconsin. I think Wisconsin right now is a lean Democratic state. If we look at the top battlegrounds average, it's plus 6.4. One thing that I definitely think is influencing this right now is this plus 17 poll, which really I don't buy. Um, it is an outlier, just how like the Susquehanna poll is an outlier. So I'm not just dismissing it because it's Biden plus 17, but it is an outlier, and we have to look at kind of the averages of it. One poll that I think is interesting right now is the Fox News Biden plus 5. Although kind of Fox News kind of on the media scene is a right leaning network. In terms of their polling, they've actually been favorable to the Democrats. So a Biden plus 5 result here is actually a pretty good sign for Trump. Obviously, this ABC News poll is disastrous for Trump. I mean, if this holds up to any degree, I mean, even if this poll is 10 points off, Biden wins by 7. I predict right now that's probably going to be between probably like a 2 to 4 point margin, but I still project Biden to come out at the end of the day. And one thing that I wanted to touch on too, I have been kind of looking at this Target early feature right now that kind of looks at the early voting even by state. However, I think it's hard right now to kind of parse this data and figure out what it means. Because in the past we've seen Democrats vote early, Republicans vote early. So like in 2016, more Democrats voted early. but obviously Trump won in Wisconsin. In 2018, more Republicans voted early, but Scott Walker lost on the governor's level. So I really think it's kind of hard to parse this data. So some data that I think we can look at is the voter registration data in Florida. But overall, voter turnout is the highest it's ever been. I think it's going to be the highest. I think we're going to get to 100 million votes cast before the election. And I think we're going to see the highest voter turnout since 1908. And I'm going to do a different video kind of just focusing on that. So right now we're at 242 to 187 right here. Next up, I want to go to the state of Michigan. Michigan right now I still have as a lean Democratic state. However, I almost kind of want to put this in the tilt Democratic state just because of some new polls that have come out. In the state of Michigan, even though I typically don't like to put a lot of faith in the Trafalgar Group's polls, consistently they've had Trump up by 1 or 2 points. And I think we kind of have to take all these polls as an aggregate and even consider that there was significant polling error in 2016. And Trafalgar Group was the most accurate poll then. So I think we should give it a little bit more credence. I did see it kind of like Nate Silver was criticizing the Trafalgar Group's polls and kind of looking at the cross sections, which I think is definitely valid. But I think we should kind of consider these polls in an aggregate and not just to dismiss any polls outright, including that plus 17 Biden poll in the state of Wisconsin. Next up, I want to go to the state of Florida. Florida, I honestly have pretty high confidence that Trump is going to win this state. Before I didn't, but just kind of looking more at the data. In 2018, the polls were skewed. The polls were skewed from Andrew Gillum. He was up by 3.5 points, but ended up losing. So that was a 4-point error. If we look at the polls right now, although Trump is up, although Biden is up, he's only up by 1.2 polls. And we've seen high quality polls that are going back and forth on this. We saw an ABC News poll. We haven't seen one lately that had Trump up by 2 points. And looking at the registration data, which is something that I think that we can look at, the Republicans have narrowed the gap to unprecedented numbers compared to past elections. And I think it's mainly due kind of to their ground game. Republicans are knocking on doors while Democrats aren't, but because of COVID. I think this makes a difference at the end of the day. Next up, I want to go to Georgia. Georgia right now, I think, is a pure swing state, but I still give Trump a little bit of an edge. I think this is right now Trump might be slightly favored in Georgia. I think in 2024 it could be turned to a pure toss-up, maybe even a Democratic state. On the Senate level, especially with the special election, I honestly could see this race tilting towards the Democrats. However, on the presidential level, Trump won Georgia by 5 points. In 2016. I don't think we're going to see over a 5-point swing, maybe a 4.5 point swing, but still a 5-point swing in any state in 4 years, especially when we're so partisan, is really hard to come by. And kind of going off that same logic, I still think North Carolina right now is going to be tilt towards the Republicans. Looking at the real core politics average, it's just like Florida, it's just like Arizona. It's very, very, very close. We've seen kind of polls on either side. I definitely think that the governor's race is going to get pretty handily to Roy Cooper, the incumbent Democrat. But on the Senate level, I honestly think at this point Tom Tillis has a pretty good chance to win. And I think that they'll line up pretty well, especially with Cal Cunningham's scandal. But we haven't seen any polls where Biden is just blowing away with it. We did see this one poll, Biden +6, but on the governor's level, Roy Cooper's up by 17. So I definitely think we kind of need to be a little bit suspicious of this poll. And I mean also maybe suspicious of this poll, but I actually went to go vote in North Carolina today, and anecdotally, it did seem like there were a lot more. We were kind of given little sheets when you walked in if you wanted to vote Republican down ballot or Democrat down ballot, and I saw more Republican sheets. I know I'm just kind of in a small precinct in North Carolina, but that's kind of my anecdotal data right there. Next up, I want to go to the state of Arizona. I'm very conflicted. I think Arizona, while before it was more of a Democratic leaning state, I think right now it's a pure toss up. Right now, I think that uh, Biden might hold a slight advantage. But if we look at the real clear politics polling average, Trump actually was up for a while, and I think now it's about even. I definitely want to check this. Yeah, so right now it's even. It's a pure tie. Um, but I mean, this race is going to come down to the wire. I mean, before I think people saw, oh, Biden's up by 5. This is a race that is narrowing. The only reason I have it as tilt Biden right now is because of the Senate race, where I think that Mark Kelly is going to help Joe Biden. But really, I mean, this is a pure toss up. I could easily see this giving it to Trump as well. So if we give it to Trump right now, we see it's 258, 258. It's going to come down to the state of Pennsylvania. These congressional districts don't matter as much. Right now, if we look at the polling data in the state of Pennsylvania, we see that it's closer. It's about half of the margin that we see in Michigan and Wisconsin. And because it's the most electoral votes out of the Rust Belt, it's very, very important. We've seen a couple one poll where Trump's up, a tied poll. The reason why I think this is going to be close is because we don't see any blowaway polls like we've seen in Wisconsin or in Michigan. No double-digit polls. The largest poll in the last week that we've seen for Biden is Biden +7, which is still only kind of one polling error away for a Trump win. The average is 3.6, which is well within the margin of error. The margin of error tends to be around 4 points for these polls. So I think that Trump is going to outperform the polls, but right now I still have this as tilting narrowly for Biden. But this race is wide, wide open. I mean, this is a very narrow victory. I think that the race in Pennsylvania is going to be contested. We've already seen court cases there. This race is getting closer by the day. I don't know if y'all remember, but before I had North Carolina, Florida, and Arizona all going for Biden. I've changed that. This race is changing. Trump is on the campaign trail, while Biden has not made as many campaign spots. I mean, this race is close. Just to kind of fill in the last ones, I think this is a lean Trump. And I think the second congressional district, while I thought it was going to be a tilt Republican, right now I kind of think it's going to be a tilt Democrat just because the Omaha Trump rally fiasco, when people were kind of left stranded, people got hyperthermia. I don't know how much that's going to impact it, but I don't think that's a great look for the Trump campaign. It seems like that they just kind of messed up. It's kind of like when Brad Parscale messed up the rally in Oklahoma in June. If y'all remember that, that was a little bit of disaster. Um, similar type thing. So right now, this is my prediction 4 days out. I just voted. Y'all go vote if you haven't voted yet. It's definitely kind of a duty if you're an American. 279 to 259. This would be the closest election since Bush v. Gore in 2000. So this is going to be a very, 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 very close race. So I'm going to go live later today. Let me know what you think of my predictions. Thanks, guys.